أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. How are you, brother?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. I'm fantastic. How are you, sister?
I am excellent. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So, mashallah, I wanted to just say welcome officially to the Coaching Corner. We are now officially live. Our streams are rolling over to our platforms. But as people come on, we are hoping, inshallah, that you all drop your salams. You let us know that you are here as we can see you, inshallah, and share the podcast. My name is Sabria Mills. I am the host and the facilitator of the Dope Muslim Woman, LLC. That is our company, mashallah. But this podcast has been around for 5 years. We are now in season 8 of the Dope Muslim Woman podcast, On the Edge. We have a familiar guest. He closed out season 7 for us, and I'm just happy and excited to bring him back. In season 8 of On the Edge, we added an additional segment called the Coaching Corner. A lot of individuals, they would really benefit from the unpacking that happened, Brother Habeeb, on the podcast, because we're an issues-driven podcast. So we would bring in issues to the forefront, and a lot of times it would be a heavy issue, like temporary marriage, for example. And a lot of our viewers said that they didn't know really what to do thereafter. And so we brought the Coaching Corner as a new segment to really offer solutions, offer support to our viewers, to our family, to our village, to assist them on the next stages beyond whatever that issue may be. We talked about divorce. Many of our podcasts has been around divorce. Our first Coaching Corner has been around that. And now we are talking about beyond the Misyar, which we will be defining, healing from secret marriages. And so I wanted to just introduce this brother. As I mentioned, he was here not too long ago. So many of you guys, and I just want to say, Brother Habeeb, the podcast that you were on, people, everywhere I went, people wanted to get into a conversation about this podcast. I couldn't escape this episode, but mashallah, I'm just so humbled to have you back. I just want to say personally, just as someone who calls herself a student, I'm a big, mashallah, I guess you can say student of yours. I have many of your books. I love a lot of your work, mashallah. So I really just want to say I appreciate that. For those who don't know, Brother Habeeb Akande, who I'm happy and honored to be with here on this Coaching Corner today. He is a world-renowned, and I want to emphasize that, author of 7 books. He's done a documentary. He is known as like a sex expert and erocologist. Am I saying that right? Erocologist. He deals a lot with female pleasure in Islam, African, as well as in African cultures. He's a public speaker, sexologist, cross-cultural sex educator. He does workshops around the world. He, again, has been on BBC documentary. If you Google him, you'll see all of his work, mashallah. So we are extremely humbled and excited to have our dear brother here tonight. Again, welcome, Brother Habeeb, back to the Dope Muslim Woman podcast. Oh my goodness. Mashallah, I expected this. This was the reason for a little bit of the delay. Walaikum salam. Brother Habeeb, mashallah, he is in the UK right now. He's here. Okay. And he's having
Yeah,
a little
sorry.
bit of connection issues, but mashallah, we're going to keep pushing. How are you, Brother Habeeb? You're back. Are you back with me?
I am. I do apologize. It's not. I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me again to your platform. And I want to commend you for your bravery, your courage, and your perseverance to tackle important and pertinent topics in the Muslim community. It's very easy to talk about things that have already been discussed before and don't really have much relevance, but I do commend you for your, like I said, your bravery to tackle important topics that definitely that the Muslim community do need and to heal from. So I definitely want to commend you for that. And for Allah to continue to give you tawfiq and to increase you in man and also to make you steadfast, because I'm sure you will get some pushback on backlash, but inshallah it's going to be beneficial for people. So that's the most important thing.
I mean, mashallah, I'm in good company, subhanAllah. I was going to say the same thing. Assalamu alaikum. Shout out to my audience. I see Mariam. I see Sister Sophia. If you are here, I want to see your salams on the live. We want this to be incredibly interactive. We do have a show here for you today. We have a heavy conversation for you today. So definitely drop your salams if you are here. and so that we could all kind of be in this together, inshallah. But brother Habib, I was just gonna say, like, mashallah, I really, like I said, I followed your work. You definitely are one of the brave ones of our brothers. You do tackle topics that I think could be easily that I know gets easily misconstrued and misunderstood. It almost sounds like you are for the woman and against the men. I know you've been accused of that many times, where you're really, mashallah, presenting a lot of facts and a lot of history and a lot of scholarship. And so I really appreciate you for just being a truth teller, and that's really something that I think we need more of. We need more of in our community. So thank you for that. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. All right, we're gonna get right into it, guys. So I'm a little bit stressed, if I could be honest with you, because these conversations are not easy. They're not easy for me. Number one, because some things are close to home. I have people that I work with that have been in these sort of situations, secret marriages and secret second wives and things like that. It's just a touchy subject, Brother Habib, if I could be really honest with you. And a lot of times I don't always like to be the one to poke the hornet's nest, believe it or not. This is something that makes people uncomfortable, but we're going to deal with it, and we're hoping that this will be helpful. This is our coaching corner, so we will be providing tools for those that may be that may be considering navigating a misyar, which we will define in just a second. Okay, navigating a misyar, who are currently involved in a misyar, or if they're healing from it, they've been in it and they're navigating, they're trying to figure out what to do now. Okay, so we're going to assist with that. So first and foremost, before I talk about anything else, I want to be really clear, Brother Habib, since you are the one who has done the research on this. What is a misyar? How can it be defined? What is it that we should know about this?
Sure. So essentially, Misyar is a marriage where one of the spouses, usually the woman, foregoes some of her marital rights. So she may forego the right to maintenance, the right to housing, or the right to have for the husband to spend certain number of nights with her, especially if he has another wife. So essentially, it's like some people call it a marriage of convenience, where a woman, like I said, generally would say that, okay, the man, he might have another wife, and the woman might say, because I've got my own place, you don't need to, look, house me. You can just come as and when you please to fulfill your needs. We can enjoy ourselves. So that's kind of, some people consider it to be like a part-time marriage, but essentially it's a marriage. It's a normal nikah, but where a woman foregoes some of her rights. Again, like I said, it's quite a controversial marriage because it is often exploited by men. And sometimes men will go to different parts of the world or different states where they will have this kind of misyar marriage, this marriage arrangement, where they have relations, and sometimes, or oftentimes, this type of arrangement is kept secret. So it's like a secret marriage, and all of the time, oftentimes it is, especially if he has another wife, and then he has like a second or third wife in another state or another country. And oftentimes these marriages do not last for a long period of time.
So that's why they're kind of pegged as temporary marriages, but that's not the actual definition, right?
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, it's not the actual definition because when someone goes into a Misyar marriage, they would not say that they're intending for this to be for 6 months, a year, what have you. But if I'm going to be completely honest with you, there are a number of what is known as drive-through marriages, where some brothers will go to some parts of the world, like Indonesia, Malaysia, Morocco, for a couple of weeks, couple of months, contract a marriage, usually with a woman from a relatively poor background, spend maybe a couple of weeks, couple of months there, enjoy her, and then divorce her and then go back to their country. Now, again, for me, it goes contradicts again the purpose of marriage in Islam, and it's something that is clearly like immoral and it's a form of exploitation. But these are the type of marriage misyar arrangements that unfortunately are quite prevalent in a number of Muslim, not only countries but also Muslim communities. And oftentimes, the women that are targeted or the women that accept these arrangements are single mothers or divorced women or converts or reverts women who are new to the religion, so they're not aware of all of their rights. So they think that this is um, it's a valid marriage in terms of from a legal perspective, but from ethical, moral perspective, it's not always sound. But there are also some women who are willing participants to engage in such a relationship. So if a woman she knows, what she's letting herself in for, then obviously that's totally different. I'm not speaking about those women. I'm not speaking about a woman who isn't aware of her rights and goes into this type of marital arrangement.
Yeah. Um, Thank you for
With
that.
this start, with this started, it can't be too heavy. You can't. The pauses.
No, I see a comment
Okay.
here. I think this is a good
Okay.
point because we last time you
Yeah.
were on here, we talked about temporary marriage and we
Yes.
talked a lot about muta. And someone just said that's muta. Can you help us understand the difference and why it get, because honestly, if I can be very honest, Habib, I didn't hear of the term misyar until like the past like 2 years ago. I've never heard of the
Yeah.
term. But I've heard of muta all of my life.
Yes.
Where's the confusion for us here? Like,
Yeah. It's a brilliant question that you ask. It's not the same as muta, like a temporary marriage or pleasure marriage, but it can be a type of temporary marriage. And the reason why is a temporary marriage is when you say that this marriage is only going to be for a set period, like 6 months, a year, what have you. With a misyar, the man is not saying this is only going to be for 6 months or a year. He might have that intention, but he will not verbalize it.
okay.
So that's the difference. So it's technically it's different. And also there are some misyar marriages that last for a number of years. So it's
Mhm.
not that it has to end within a couple of months or a year, like a temporary marriage. Now, the purpose of misyar marriages oftentimes it is for pleasure. So when the person asks, that sounds like mut'a, because ultimately, I mean, if I'm going to be honest, what misyar is in many cases is intimacy without responsibility is when a man generally wants to, or even the woman wants that, but it's generally the man who's because he's having enjoying the woman in terms of from an intimate perspective without the responsibility of maintaining her, without the responsibility of people knowing that this is my woman and this is my wife, I need to look after her. So that's why people refer to it as a type of temporary marriage, but it's not a temporary marriage in and of itself because you can have a Messiah. I know people that's been in Messiah marriages for over 7 years, 8 years, and it's still going on. So it's not so, and they consider it as a true marriage. It's just that they have like a part-time husband, if you want to call it that.
Okay. So let me try to frame this from my background. So when I was growing up, one thing I do remember is people getting married and the brother and the sister, something called sister giving up her rights. We didn't
Yeah.
call it misyar marriage, but that was just a regular marriage from our perception. But we knew the sister was paying all the bills, right? For example,
Yes.
or the brother wasn't paying for anything. That's considered a is that considered a misyar?
And that's it, yeah. So that happened, and the reason where I'm glad you brought it up, this started maybe like 20, 30 years ago, where you had a number of people in the Middle East, a lot of the Arabs, when they were traveling, maybe they were businessmen or going on holidays to different parts of the world, they would then have marriages, but then they will say to the wife, I can't be with you, you know, because I've got another wife back home. So that's why she will forego her rights. And then some women will say that you don't need to give me maintenance. So then what happened is a number of brothers, especially brothers who studied in Saudi Arabia, because that's where it was prevalent and followed like a Salafi interpretation of Islam. A lot
Oh,
of those brothers, both in the UK and in America, it was quite prevalent amongst brothers who follow, like I say, Salafi interpretation of Islam. We have a number of brothers, like in the UK, I'm sure the similar in America, where the woman might be working, the woman might be on welfare or benefits, and
mm-hmm.
he's saying, I don't need to you know, provide for you. I'm just there to give you pleasure. And the woman's thinking that this is, because she wants some companionship. So that is how that, but they wouldn't necessarily call it a misyar, they just call it a marriage. And they would argue, like, technically that you can do this, although, again, it clearly contradicts the spirit of Islam and what marriage is supposed to be, because marriage should be a permanent arrangement. But the way a number of people exploit it is that if the woman agrees, or they'll put pressure on the woman to say that, or after they've had a relationship, or she's fell in love with him, he might say, my situation, I'm married, I can't leave my wife, I can't leave my children. But the way we can still be with each other is if we can have this arrangement, we can get married, but I can't come to you every other day. I can't afford to give you another house. And then she will say, okay, I've already got a house. I've already got the government supporting me anyway. So that's fine. We can still have halal intimacy, shall we call it. So that's kind of like how, you have a lot of brothers who kind of exploit this type of legal loophole, shall we say. But they might have not called it a misyar, but that's essentially what it is because it's a woman foregoing her rights.
Right. Okay. Then now it makes sense because Lord knows I remember that in the inner city. Um. Okay. Really quickly before we get into this scenario here, I just want to understand. You said legal loophole. What is the actual frame? Like, what's the reference for or the dalil behind or the argument? Like, where does it come from? Could you give us that? Like, why do people
Okay,
say this is halal?
okay. Can I put it to you like this then, rather than me kind of explaining, so you can kind of understand? If someone were to say, can can two people get married,
Mm,
but they don't want to have children? Is that allowed in Islam?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
You think so? Yeah. Okay. So you don't need to want to have children or have children for the marriage to be valid, right?
Right. Of course.
Great. Okay. If two people want to get married, but they agree they don't want to live in the same country, they're both in different states. Is that still a legal marriage? And they're going to see each other every couple of months? Is that halal or not?
Halal. Yep.
It's allowed, right? Okay. Likewise, if two people, obviously man and woman, they agree that they're only going to see each other once every couple of months, is that allowed?
It's allowed.
It's allowed, right? Okay. So then the brother is going to put it that, okay, I've got my situation. I've got another wife. I can't afford to come to see you every other day. Um, and the woman saying, okay, I've got my own house and things like that. Then you can only come and see me whenever you like. So the marriage is legally valid. It's halal, right? Now, my next question: does a man need permission from his parents to marry a woman?
See, I don't.
I'm just
I feel like
asking a
that's a
question.
tricky question.
No, I'm saying as a condition of the marriage. Just
No, it's not a condition of the marriage.
it's not a condition of the marriage. As a condition of the marriage, does a man need permission from his first wife to contract a marriage with another woman? As a
It's not.
condition. I'm not saying sorry.
Well, I thought there was something in the Maliki school where that's there. That's what I was told by Maliki scholar.
Yeah, if she said that you can't, unless she said that. But I'm
Okay.
saying if assuming he's got he's contracted a marriage with the first wife, but she hasn't said anything about you can't take another wife. That's where the Maliki. I know where you're coming with that
Okay.
point.
I just
But
wanted
imagine he has a regular marriage. There's nothing in the contract that says he can't take a second wife. I'm just asking the question. I'm not talking about whether it's immoral
No,
or
I know.
unethical.
It's
Yeah.
not
So
a part. It's
so
not a condition of the
yeah.
marriage. Yes, I
Right.
agree.
So it's
Yes.
not a condition. So
Yes.
you agree from what you've just said, if we Sheikh Sabria, Coach Sabria has basically said a man is allowed to marry a woman and see her every couple of months or once a year. And you've also said that a man doesn't need permission from his first wife to marry a second wife. You said that legally that's halal, that's allowed. That's what you said, right?
I mean, I feel like this is a setup. I guess so, Brother Habib. I
Right,
guess
right,
so.
right. So yeah, yeah. So from a legal perspective, I'm just trying to walk you through. Like
I got you.
technically, it's allowed. Like technically,
Yes.
from a legal perspective, but
Yes.
of course, ethically and morally, it's wrong because you're hiding that from the first wife. Does that make sense? So that's why I'm saying it's a legal loophole. Because from a
Okay.
legal perspective, the man would argue, I do not need permission from my first wife to contract another marriage. The same way as a man, I do not need permission from my parents to marry a woman. Of course, it's good to have their blessing. It's good to tell them, because if you were to say you require their permission, now you're entering a condition that's not stipulated from the Quran or the Sunnah. That's why you have to say you have to be very careful. Like
Okay.
you can't say it's actual condition, but at the same time, if we are going to be people of morals and character and ethics, then you wouldn't do that because you're deceiving your first wife. So
Okay.
that's why I say it's a legal loophole because from a legal perspective, and that's why when people ask scholars, they'll ask the question: Is is it is my if I marry another woman and my first wife doesn't know, is my second wife, I mean my second marriage, is that valid? Is it halal? Now the scholar might say it's valid or it's halal, meaning that marriage contract is valid. It doesn't mean that what you've done is correct because you've gone behind your wife's back. That's why I'm just explaining the thought process
The
where
thought process.
brothers, the thought process, because brothers oftentimes will be approaching marriage purely from a legalistic perspective, from fit without looking at the ethics, the principles of the Sharia, the fact that you're deceiving your first wife, the
which
fact
is
that,
haram.
which is
You
haram
to violate
exactly,
someone's rights. Haram.
violating someone's rights clearly, or even the fact that you're deceiving someone. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, clearly said, "Whoever deceives us is not from us." So you
Yeah.
can't deceive people. But so that's from a moral and ethical perspective, and of course, it's haram. But in terms of the validity of the marriage contract, the second one, it's legal. Does that make
Okay.
sense? Even though it's immoral. So that's my point where I'm saying it's a legal loophole because it's legally valid, although the whole arrangement is unethical and immoral, and you could argue it's haram. That's where I'm just saying that the brothers are playing. Oftentimes, some women as well do it, but this is where, because like
Yeah.
a woman, like
Women be a
you can have
part
a
of that.
woman, you can have a woman, and this is I know this case, some of these cases have happened where she is close friends with another woman,
Yeah.
and she's asked her friend's husband, "Would you be interested in a Misyar arrangement? Like, you know my situation. I've got a place, this and the other. I know you're a good brother. I know you're a good husband. But I won't tell your first wife." Now he's then contracted that marriage. So he's married to the two friends. Now that marriage with the other friend is legally valid, but of course the whole arrangement is unethical and immoral, and you could argue it's haram. But from a legal perspective, that marriage is still valid. And the reason why scholars will say that the reason why it's important to understand this is because if you say that certain marriage is not valid, are you then saying if they were to have children, those children are not from that man? You
Right.
understand my point? So again, the only reason I'm presenting this is because when people study, they're just studying the legalities, the rules. It's like a lawyer or a solicitor. They're just studying the legal rules. They're not talking about the moral implications. And then it doesn't mean they're saying that you can take these and exploit these legal loopholes. You can't. I'm not saying that you can, but I'm just saying this is the thought
Just
process of
think.
why people do it, and they think it's Islamically sound and valid. And because a lot of women, unfortunately, haven't been educated, understand the basic of like um, the Islamic rights, they don't understand the way it works. So when brothers maybe are running game on them, they're just thinking
Mhm.
this is like what Islam says, and I don't have no rights. When, as you alluded to, you can't cheat someone, you can't deceive someone. So if you just know that as a basis, then
Yes.
that type of arrangement, have whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, misyar, marriage of convenience, um, temporary marriage or pleasure marriage, it's unethical and it's immoral, and you shouldn't be doing that. So, but it's so this is yeah. So that's kind of like the backdrop of like how it works.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. Okay, Brother Habib, I want to get into this case study. And from this, I'm gonna give you a scenario of a real sister, but we're gonna call her Fulana for the purpose of this, okay?
Like,
Who's willing to share her story anonymously for the purpose of us unpacking it. And from this point, we're going to look at it from all different kind of viewpoints and kind of see, because we also want to humanize this experience in a sense of where it's easy to, kind of pick it apart, which, I know it's tempting to do that just because of all of the implications. I know a sister just asked here, what about the children? What about the wali? And, all these different things that kind of give birth from this sort of place of where there's secrecy and deception, etc. But these real human beings are navigating this. Good people navigate this, right? People with real situations. So, okay, so I'm going to talk about Sister Fulana, okay? Bismillah. So, Sister Fulana, she's 45 years old. She's been divorced for 6 years, or she was divorced for 6 years, past tense, right? She has two children with her ex husband, one who is 18 and the other is 19 years old of age. Both children went away to university, so they're not necessarily full time, and they're no longer full time in a mother's home, which has caused Fulana to feel an emotional void and loneliness unlike before. She works as a cardiologist and she lives a very comfortable economic life. She has homes that she owns, cars, vacation homes, etc. For the past 6 years, she drove herself into work, the years of her single years. She drove herself into her work. She raised her children. She served in various ways in her community. She stayed extremely busy. However, her recently she has had an increase in drive for male companionship, and her sexual desires is taking its toll. Um, there were a couple years, there have been years of no proposals, marriage proposals, or unsuitable ones. She was approached in recent times by a businessman for a misyar. He was attractive, he was in her age range, and he was intellectually, financially, and through her perception, religiously sound. He did have another wife and children who lived in another state. After she involved herself in the misyar for a few years, and during those years there were occasional visits, typically during like vacation times, work trips, etc., of the brother where he would visit her. But during this time she became very emotionally attached and emotionally exhausted, and she asked for her rights, she asked to have a marriage of rights, and she was told no, and she was heartbroken and devastated. So one of the things she did in this particular situation is she actually reached out to the first wife out of desperation, and the marriage became exposed. um, and the first wife put out something on social media which kind of damaged her reputation. She was well known in the community for her philanthropy and her work as a cardiologist in the Muslim community. So then the misyar, the relationship broke down, as well as elements of her reputation, and she is trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces of her life. So this is Fulana. This is Fulana. So I wanted to first and foremost just kind of start from the beginning here, because I know, mashallah, I see you all the time. You're always putting up case studies, case studies, case studies on your Instagram and through your work in social media for all of us to unpack. And I know you unpack a lot of them. First and foremost, how common is this sort of scenario of the women who are divorced, or maybe their husbands have passed on and are just they're very successful economically in their lives, but they're just trouble with finding a traditional marriage? Is that really common for us from your lens and your work?
Very, very common. I've heard that story many times,
Yeah.
and it covers so many points, and I'm hopefully people can really digest. I'm sure people will be might be triggered because when they heard that, it's going to be thinking about the first wife and the children, so she might be seen as a homewrecker. I'll come to that part. Assuming that the wife knew, and first wife didn't know, but irrespective of whether she knew or not, the fact that, like you said, a woman, 45, which is still relatively young, she's got two now adult children, and she's got her needs. She wants male companionship, which is well within her right to desire that. And again, she's met someone like you mentioned who was intellectually an intellectual, someone who's the point where she said religiously sound. That's where I'll
Oh, okay. Let's be a little patient. Again, our brother Habib is all the way from the UK. It's the middle of the night there. Um, and so there's some connectivity issues here and there, but inshallah he'll be right back. Um,
sorry.
nope, you're fine. You're back. Okay, you're with me.
Yeah,
All
sorry.
right.
Um, So the only point where, and I will unpack, but the about what can she do. But when she described the person as being religiously sound, if someone is religiously sound, I'm assuming she meant by that is someone is practicing. But then
Yeah.
for me, I would look at it that if this person is practicing, he's also a person of character and of ethics and morals. And if you're a person of character and ethics and morals, you wouldn't deceive your first wife. You wouldn't enter that type of arrangement. This is where I think some sisters they get lost by someone being religiously sound, meaning they're knowledgeable or they've had the appearance of being someone that's very religious. But if you're someone that's religious, and I'm equating someone that's religious, not just being able to quote Quran, know the Hadith, know all of these stories, but also what is your character like? Now, for me, if you are religiously sound of good character, you've got a wife and you've got children, and then you're going to try and see if you can have another wife secretly without telling the first wife, which is also again is fairly immoral and unethical. Was also potentially you think your first wife doesn't have the right to know who you're sleeping with. What if you're carrying? What if she has an STD? There's things that if we just look at it on a human level, or even non-Muslims, they don't think like this. So my question is that even like for non-Muslims who may be having an affair, they know it's wrong, but the fact that as Muslims, or we can think someone is religiously sound and would do such a thing, then my question is, what is our understanding of what it means to be religious? Or what is
Mm,
our understanding of the religion? Because if you think that that is acceptable in our religion, if you think that's something that the Prophet, peace be upon him, would endorse or allow men to do, then I would argue that you haven't understood our religion. And that's the biggest problem. Because I think, again, just what she said, and again, I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to attack or anything, but I'm just saying I've heard that a lot, and they say, "Oh, but he's a good brother. He's very knowledgeable." I said, "Okay, yeah, he might be very knowledgeable, but they say religiously sound, but then he's going to potentially endanger his first wife. He's going to potentially, destroy her, and you think that is acceptable behavior of a religious person."
right.
That's the third thing that when I heard that, I was like, I've heard that before, but again, it's people's perception of what it
Absolutely.
means to be religious. But coming
Absolutely.
to like again, not to again cast any aspersions against or anything like that. There are so many issues. So where again, she's got a right to desire companionship. She's only 45. She's really young, and again, so she now this is also one of the problems with when you go into Misyar. So it sounds like she was happy with arrangement. Maybe every couple of weeks, couple of months, he has relations with her. That's fine. Then, like you mentioned, she wanted more emotional connection and attachment. So now she doesn't want. Now she wants more of her rights. She wants to be treated as an equal with the other wife. But to be fair to the man, he didn't agree to that. And then she's now gone behind his back and then contacted the first wife.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
can you imagine what it's like for the first wife? So although I'm not, again, I don't necessarily agree with her retaliating or exposing her, but I can see because you've just brought this trauma onto the first wife out of nowhere, assuming she hasn't heard any of this, and all of a sudden you've got this random woman saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm also married to your husband, and I want to have equal nights with him."
The common
So
story in
imagine,
our community.
yeah,
A
it
common
is, it is.
story
So,
in our community. Mhm.
this is where, as much as like I have obviously more empathy with the first wife in this scenario. That's not to say that you should ostracize the second lady, but this is where accountability is important because you
Right.
put yourself in this situation. Yes, you desire companionship. Yes, you want, and you've got a right to that. But you've actually, in this case, you've kind of gone and destroyed a marriage. The man is culpable as well. Don't get me wrong; it takes two to tango. But I'm saying in this scenario, you put yourself in that situation, and then you also contacted the first wife. If you mention it like, okay, she was happy with this arrangement, and then the first wife found out, and then was that's something totally different, or she was none the wiser, or she thought the first wife knew about this arrangement. That's different. But this is where she's gone into this arrangement, whether you want to call it misyar, marriage, what have you, was happy to be, a bit on the side if you want to call it that, but the halal wife. But then now she's gone and like essentially sabotaged the first marriage. That's why for this type of scenario, I would be more case of accountability is important for you
Yeah.
to
But let me
overcome this.
ask
And if you,
this. Let
yes,
me ask this. I don't want to cut you off, Habib, but I think it's important. The trauma of the secret. I agree with you 100%. But I also want
yeah,
to unpack how it got to that point, right? It sounds like a pretty functional woman. She was a doctor. She was known in the community. She spiraled to that point. Of course, she needs to be accountable 100%. But the trauma of the secret, like when people enter into
yes,
these sort of secret deceptive, and it just doesn't feel right. It's out of
yep,
alignment for a lot of people, and then maybe they try to fix it, maybe they try to get out of it, maybe but I want us to talk a little bit about that because I think that's important.
right. As in, why would someone put themselves in that position? Because someone is high flyer or cardiologist, doing well in their career. It doesn't mean that they don't have any issues in terms of interpersonal relationship because that's a void that's not being fulfilled.
Yeah.
And out of maybe, it's a human being. It could be desperation or because he might have said certain things to her, then all of a sudden she thinks actually this situation can work because I'm busy with my work and this. So what I'm trying to say, I can understand how a woman or a man can get themselves in that predicament. I can understand it. With her case, again, it's I'm more troubled because you've gone into that situation and then you've
Mhm.
wanted to change it. If it
Right.
was you was happy with that situation. Again, and the advice I would give to like if it's a woman who was in that type of situation and she was happy with it, and then the first wife came and that's totally different. Then it's how do and then the husband divorced her. That's different. Whereas in this situation, he went into the arrangement saying, "Okay, I want to have this temporary. I mean, this arrangement. I'm only seeing you maybe once or a couple of times a month. Now you've now said, actually, forget that. I want to see you every other day. Then he's going to be like, well, my priority is my first wife. I'll divorce you then. Then obviously, I think the trauma obviously will be for like she could feel like she's being used, and she has somewhat. But again, this is where the accountability part I think is
Yeah,
extremely
part of
important. And
that work.
without attacking, but just like the accountability that if you're looking at it, this man, this is all he wanted. Now, if you convince yourself that, okay, I thought I can change him, because some women will say that I thought after we get to know each other, we fall in love, he would want me just as much as he wants the first wife. But then that's an assumption that you had, but he didn't tell you that. That's also a problem, because if you've gone into this arrangement secretly, but then you think you can get a good outcome for your own best interest and it hasn't worked to the way you liked, that's something you're gonna have to kind of hold.
Right.
Like,
Absolutely.
and I
But I
do,
think,
yes,
I
yeah, go
think
on.
this is really important because and I'm just being very honest, Brother Habib. When we did temporary marriage, when we did that episode, I told you, people approached me because I was traveling
Yeah,
during that time. People were approaching me all around the country, right? Like people were coming up to me and they wanted to unpack it. And you know what most sisters said that approached me? I want to figure out how I can do it, right? And so of course I always asked why or what was the reason and things like that. And a lot of women were just saying, well, maybe I want a placeholder, or maybe I just don't have, I don't see anything suitable for what they would say, like maybe a regular marriage. And what I'm saying about this is, yes, in this scenario, but this happens a lot because a lot of times people may enter into these situations, especially women. They'll enter into these situations maybe out of desperation, maybe out of a feeling there's nothing else, maybe out of a situation of, like I said, a lot of people said they need a placeholder for a while, and not really understanding the emotional implications that it's gonna, the spiritual. It's a covenant. You're
yeah,
being physical with someone. All the things that come with that for us, especially
yeah,
as women in particular, not really knowing like what that can lead to. You may have different past traumas that get provoked because you're having sex with someone that's leaving you thereafter and going back and living a regular life with their family, and so I think also in this situation, yes, the accountability is important, but I also just, the thought when sisters go into the situation without judgment, with when they don't really think about these things.
that's the thing. They're not aware. So that, well, what you're saying is what they need to be aware of.
Right.
I think a lot of women are not built for those type of relationships. If I'm honest with you, a lot of men can do it, unfortunately, and we don't really feel anything. But a lot of women, they might go into it, like you said, out of desperation. But a lot of women cannot deal with that type of arrangement. But if a woman is told that even from the beginning, those women who are coming to you thinking about it, okay, I understand. You have to acknowledge their feelings, and I can understand why you'd want to enter that type of arrangement. But for them to think about the implications, especially if it doesn't work, the ramifications, and like you said, the spiritual, emotional trauma that they might feel, that's at the end if it's not worth it. So there's a lot of things that we go into, even certain ventures that we might think about, but then you have to do like a risk benefit analysis, or like the cost, like think about, is it worth it? And then if the cost or the risk outweigh where you think it's not worth it, then you just don't do it. That's what I think a lot of women, because maybe when they're maybe very in an emotional state or they're really desiring companionship, they're not thinking about like it's probably not going to work. They're not thinking about all of the red flags that if they were in a clear head, or if they were speaking to a friend or whatever, they'll probably tell them this isn't going to end well. If you just want to do this to have a good time for halal intimacy, then so be it. And you think it's not going to last that long. Like he's more likely to divorce you after because he's going to go back to his first wife. It's up to you. But if you think you can make this like a permanent, long-term marriage, and he's going to treat you the way he treats his first wife, or even replace his first wife, I just think they need to be aware of those implications. And I think that a lot of women like to go into these arrangements without really thinking about the implications that not only it can do to for them, but also their other sister in Islam. Because the same way you might do this to another woman might do this to you. What goes around comes around. So it's just thinking again, and again, it's very easy to say, don't get me wrong, because I know when it feels hopeless, when one feels that they're not going to find love again, and we all deserve to find love and be with someone, it's very easy for someone to sit on a high horse and say, "You should just wait, just trust Allah." It's very easy to say that. That's why I'm I'm acknowledging their feeling. I'm acknowledging that they were seeking or they need companionship, but I don't think a lot of women are aware of the implication that generally what results at the end of these type of arrangements. Whereas a number of men can have multiple of these type of arrangements and still go to sleep with his wife and not think about it. Honestly, I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's right, but that the coldness that and sometimes a lot of men have, and we're able to compartmentalize things. A lot of women, you're not built for it that way. So you go into this type of arrangement again, like I said, I've seen a lot of the destruction is caused to the woman themselves, that they've gone into it willingly, but after, like I said, they felt like they've been used, they felt like they've been exploited. But then again, without judging them, it's always the question that comes up, especially when other women find out or the community, is that you put yourself in this position, and then there's a lot of blame and shame, unfortunately, that's gone to these women, and they feel that who can they talk to? Because even
Yeah,
the story that you said,
thank you for saying.
if you were to post that on social media, the comment they'll be attacking the attack, and that's it's unfair. Like again, she's a human being. She, especially if I'm assuming she didn't do that maliciously. She was seeking someone, and then she thought, okay, now I'm actually a wife. I want to let the first wife know if we can make this situation a bit better, so it's better for both of us. A lot of people won't have much sympathy for her. Unfortunately, that's why it's important also that she will find a supportive tribe, supportive friends who could understand where she's coming from, and then give her time to heal. Because again, it's not so for a woman who's recovering, like in that situation, she needs time to heal from it. Women who are thinking about it, just be aware of like the potential implications. That's what I would say.
I agree, and I appreciate you saying that. I know this is a very maybe taboo or I don't know, uncomfortable thing to say rather, but I do think that, like I said, first of all, we are doing a show far as the healing aspect. So we are this conversation is geared to that. And I do, I know some of the comments they're like, oh my gosh, who would do that, etc. Which I get it. Like I get that knee jerk question or that knee jerk. But the reality is that many people are just navigating all types of
Mm.
relationships, and some people have been convinced that this is okay or this is what you should do. Some people think, okay, this will work for me, the other thing didn't. There's all kinds of things. People have childhood stuff, people have, I mean, really, people come from communities where it's normalized. There's just a lot happening here. And one of the things that I see that really does break my heart, where I do see people that may have made maybe challenging choices, they don't have anywhere to go, they hide it, they live in shame. Then eventually they kind of like separate themselves from community, and it just becomes sad. And I think like it doesn't have to necessarily be that way. There always should be a way to sort of kind of come back.
Okay,
Yeah,
so can
go
I ask
ahead.
you a question?
Yeah.
Um, if a woman like the lady Fulana were to say that story publicly amongst a number of sisters in one of your local mosques that you attend, what do you think would be the reaction amongst a number of women that you know of? Be honest.
Oh, she would be ripped to shreds. Nobody would want to be around her. She would be labeled as the home wrecking. I mean, like really, I mean, honestly, like in the world of women, it can be kind of vicious. And I'm just being really honest. I hate to say it. Sorry, but it can be pretty vicious. And so yeah, she would be totally ripped to shreds.
Why is that? Just try to understand if she's again,
Well, I
she's
mean, there's obviously, like you mentioned yourself, there's obviously some challenges with the decisions here. There's obviously some decisions that were made that the person made willingly that weren't the best. They were also weren't considerate. Yeah. I mean, like they didn't. They showed like a lack of regard for someone else. It may have even showed that can this person be trusted? There may be some questions about character right there that can come up just from this scenario, the situation.
but where someone has done this, again, so we're not talking about someone who's thinking about doing this. So someone's done this, so they
Yeah.
know what they've done is probably wrong. They're remorseful. They need some help. Why would people then want to shred them, tear them apart? That's what I'm trying to understand, especially in
Yeah.
that
I
women
think
naturally are
that's
more
one of our
compassionate.
flaws. I think that's one of our flaws. But then that kind of pivots into another conversation. Um, that I don't want to be I feel like you're the one to bring it up. But when it comes to, I think, these sort of situations, you know, that particular woman might be forever viewed as threatening, right? Even
Yeah.
if she's remorseful, she made sincere toba and she has committed her life to doing something completely different. And between her and Allah knows best, but maybe between her and Allah, but that she may forever be a
Because,
threat with, you know,
yeah.
from
Because you know, a number of women who have been in those type of situations, in many cases, they will find men are more likely to listen to them than women. 'Cause I've heard that a lot of women who've been in those type of like they've been the other woman, not necessarily someone that they're romantically involved with, but they
oh,
find men are less likely to judge them
okay.
than even their close friends, which is also quite problematic because sometimes those men can then have a romantic interest in that woman, but it's not always the case. But I'm always trying to understand because again with men, I think like when men are you hear men are less judgmental of other men, even who crazy stuff.
Hmm.
And that's the thing. So that's why I think as you can disclose some of the most crazy things that you've done, which again is abhorrent in terms of cheating on your wife and this that, and the other. But men will kind of maybe give you advice like kind of be careful. This is why, or how do I get out of this? I'm in this situation. How do I kind of what should I do now? Like if my friend's coming to me and he said, I've got my I'm married for 14 years but I met the love of my life and I got her pregnant, another woman that he's with, right? I'm not gonna start attacking it. You've got yourself in that situation, obviously it's wrong. You've cheated on your wife, you've got another woman pregnant. But the way he said it to me that, I'm married, but you know, the one that I really love, I got her pregnant. So now how can I deal with the issue? That's what I'm focused on. I'm not focused on the decision that he made. Like, why did you do this? You shouldn't have put yourself in that position. Yes, that's correct, but he's now done that. So that's why I'm just trying to how can we
But
maybe
that's why
empower
women, we don't
the
think,
women
but that's
yeah,
why
how can we even
sisters don't
empower
think.
women?
But real quick though, just to comment on what you said, that's why a lot of women don't think men hold other men accountable because of that what you just said. Like that. Whereas a man, like you said, a man is not going to focus on what he did wrong. He's going to focus on how he can fix it or like the solution. Because I know you guys
Because it's
can
done.
focus on the solution, but
Yeah, because it's
also
done.
you guys,
You know
I
why?
think men do struggle with holding other men accountable.
Yeah, but you know why as well? Because it's done. So if a man is doing
Oh,
something that I don't agree with, and it's abhorrent, I'm not going to deal with. There's no point me talking about how could you do this, but he's done it. And that's what I'm saying. If it was someone that was coming to me and said that I'm thinking of sleeping with this woman, and I know that he's in a marriage and this that, and the other, if I'm like, yeah, go and do it, that's different. I'm not holding him accountable. If I say to him, think about your family, think about the consequences, this that, and the other, then I'm holding him accountable. But if he's come to me after he's done the act, like the same way, if someone has had a child out of wedlock and they've now come into the mosque and now saying this, and then the people are just chastising them, saying, "How could you commit zina? How can you be alone with someone of the opposite sex? How can you do this? How can that's not you're not solving it. You're not the deed is done. They're trying to say, okay, no, it's true, the deed is done. It's
no,
like,
I
okay,
agree. I mean, it sounds
is there a
very
toba?
logical and rational.
It's just but that's from
We
our
don't
sunnah
think
as
that
well.
way.
No, but
We
that's
don't
from
think
our
that way.
that's from our teaching as well. When people came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and said they've committed zina, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wasn't like, how could you have done this? You're not supposed to be alone with a woman. But he never said any of that. He's dealing with, okay, here and now, okay, you can still make toba. You can that he's talking about the
Yeah.
realities in terms of so I'm just trying to understand I'm trying to understand that space without condoning it. Don't get me wrong, especially if a woman's done that. But if someone is coming to you, they know they're probably speaking from a place of pain, like if they want to heal. But if your first thought, I'm not saying you fish it, but I'm just saying if the first thought is you're a threat because you might do that to my husband, or you might, that's why we need to like a scarlet letter. We need to get you out of the masjid. Just thinking that is a problem because I'm saying as
Yeah.
men, unless a man has done something completely egregious like molesting a child or something, that's I don't think most men would tolerate that. But other stuff, making out like cheating on your wife is not bad. No, that's bad. Don't get me wrong. But they'll try and talk about okay, this is what you've done. How can you resolve it? So if a man's come to you and he said that okay, I've got another woman pregnant, my wife doesn't know. What should I do? What are you gonna are you gonna start reciting verses from the Quran, hadith that it's haram to be alone with a woman and it's haram to commit zina? Are you gonna say that, or are you gonna talk about He's going to tell his wife how to tell her, when to tell her.
Yeah.
You're going to deal with the issue at hand. And I'm just saying, likewise, if the woman is so I've gone on a bit. How about you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you 100% what you're saying. I just think that obviously, being that the man is more so inclined to deal with issues rationally, kind of intellectually, logically, the woman is more inclined to deal with things emotionally. And I don't want to say irrationally, I don't want to offend anybody, but sort of, outside the realm of like rational thought when it comes to these sort of things. Go ahead.
Okay. If that person that came, even if it was the woman that came, was her daughter, would that woman have the same reaction?
I don't know. I can't say honestly, and I would just say
Generally,
as
generally,
someone.
I'm saying generally. Do you think? Because I personally don't think
I mean,
my brother.
I can't speak of
Mm,
that because I don't have that personal experience. I can only speak as someone that may coach women that are navigating this or that may deal
okay.
with this or that, because I don't
Yeah.
really necessarily understand the rationale of like cancel culture, pegging someone something their entire lives. I see this often.
Okay.
And I also feel like you said, like with women, when it comes to these sort of situations, I do know a lot of women who may have navigated, and I'm just going to say this. I'm not trying to point any fingers, but a lot of women have been like mistaught their dean, and they've learned from men who wanted to benefit from these type of arrangements. That's how they learn, and that's their response. That's our responsibility as women. But a lot of some of the trickle down of information, right? The misinformation as it relates to marriage in general, just period, which is one of the reasons why we even started the Dope Muslim Woman podcast, because the things I saw growing up was crazy, right? Just in the realm of relationships and marriages, right? Way
Can you give
outside the
some
book.
examples, please? Can you give?
Just what we're talking. I guess they were Misyar marriages, like having women in a band having 3, 4 wives, and one is in this abandoned building, that one doesn't have water, this one doesn't have windows, and we're all doing the sunnah, right? And then we're all demanding obedience, and then we're all demanding and things. And I'm not trying to point the finger at my brothers, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying I saw that myself growing up, right? And that was normalized and just
Okay.
what it was, and that was the dean, quote unquote. And this wasn't I'm just saying I saw certain
Yeah.
situations. I wasn't raised that way, alhamdulillah.
Mhm.
But what I'm saying is that a lot of times this came from and people may say, wow, why would a woman accept that? We would say that now. Women today would say, why would a sister accept that? But at that time, that was the information that
Yeah.
sister had. That was also the standard in her environment and in her community. And some of the sisters that get involved in Misyar, like if you even read some of the research on it, I know you have, but I'm talking now to the audience. People, especially in other countries and other societies, where it's kind of normalized, right? It's something that is done. It's difficult when you down say, "Wow, is that woman just desperate? Does she have just the lowest self-esteem?" Maybe, but also like, what has she been taught, right? And if that has been what she has been taught, does she have an opportunity to unlearn? Does she have an opportunity to re-enter into community and be supported by the village of women? That would be my question as it relates to Fulana, right? Yes, she made
Mhm.
horrendous choices along the way, but that would be my question.
Okay, then how do we create more of those villages of women that you said that you refer to? I agree with what you, so that's the last point because you did mention that women like Fulani will find it difficult to find that supportive tribe of other women. They'll be criticizing us. So then how do you create those villages where women are empathetic, compassionate, and can support a woman like Fulana?
I mean, it really requires the self work, and I think this is just the woman's lens. We're about to get into the brothers. We all have to do our own work, though, right? And that really, when I say our own work, and that is cultivating our own individual relationship with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and that individual relationship easier said than done. But when Allah is my objective, right, and I have a responsibility, I have an amana. Now I'm looking at my relationship with Allah and my responsibility on this earthly realm as an amana. My body is an amana, my children are an amana, my relationship with you is an amana. It's a trust. Allah has given me this, and it's a trust. Now it becomes something where I don't feel like I have to control and possess or attach to my self-worth. Now it's attached to the responsibility that Allah has given me and in my slavehood, right? But that only comes if we're really cultivating that relationship. If we're cultivating the relationship with the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and we're willing to deal with some of our deep, murky stuff. I mean, I had self-esteem and self-worth issues just as a result of just different experiences I've had, right? I had to work, and it's a daily practice of working through that. But it's impossible if we are women, if we as women, or me as a woman, is dealing or operating from a place of my wounds. I'm not going to be able to have any compassion for anyone else. So we have to just constantly be able to do the work to be able to create that, and also just understand, like, a lot of times when I see like the sisters pitted at each other, and I deal with that even personally, with me personally, people sometimes treat me that way. I just see it as a direct result of the scarcity culture that exists within our community, as it relates to just there not being enough men, and our worth being tied to marriage, and all of these different things that have been very problematic for Muslim women in communities. And that's just what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I heard. I do feel that in many Muslim communities we have an unhealthy relationship with marriage, the way we view marriage, and I would argue that the way some people view marriage is like somewhat like as if they worship marriage, as
Yeah.
if marriage is there to like they're there to serve marriage when really marriage should serve you. As in, if it's not aligned right for you, then you don't need to get married. You don't need, like, it's not that it doesn't define you. But I think even when, and again, a misunderstanding maybe of certain hadiths about marriage completing half of your deen, they look at it as in if they're not married, they're half of a Muslim, and that's not what the hadith means at all. So
Yeah.
there is, and even like the fact that again, because again, amongst brothers, we don't have that pressure. Because maybe society, we don't have that pressure culturally as well, that pressure as well. But I think amongst a number of women, maybe because it's not the hadiths that are the issue, it's how it's been taught, or how they've been taught Islam, is that your worth lies in you being either a mother or wife. And I'm saying that in and of itself is problematic, because your worth lies in you being a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That should be your priority.
Yeah.
Now, again, not everyone's going to get married, and even during the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, like this whole idea that you hear a lot of these podcasts or these lectures about like the marriage crisis, and there is, in many cases there is a marriage crisis. But do you think during the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that everyone got married? Do
Right.
you think that everyone got married? There was a lot of people that did not get married. People have this impression that because there was polygamy, everyone got married. No, there was a lot of people that even when there was polygamy, there's many people that couldn't afford to get married, but people don't really talk about that. Do you understand what I mean? So, and even like the stories of a woman who went to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and asked what is the rights of the husband over the wife. When the Prophet outlined what the rights were, she said, "Okay, if that's the case, I don't want to get married." And then he didn't say anything. He didn't say, "Taqillah," or "What kind of woman are you?" Don't need like. There's a lot of those stories that people are kind of neglecting. Now, again, I'm not discouraging marriage. I'm not saying that, but the whole idea that if a woman is not married, she's not a real Muslim, or she's not complete. That's a problem in and of itself. And I think I do hear those more from women than from men, because a lot of women, they tie their identity to being, like I said, a mother or a wife. And if she's not a wife, especially if she's not a wife, like if she's a divorcee or a single mother, she's seen as a threat amongst other married women. I'm saying that is a problem. That's a big problem, because the way we view, your sister, you're seeing her as, because she's young, attractive, not married, oh, she potentially might take my husband. It's like that's a problem. So I'm just wondering, how
Yeah.
are we? Yeah, what is it? How is it, like you mentioned earlier, what the men are teaching the women, or is it the women that need to educate themselves more in terms of what the dean says and what their worth is?
I think it's a complex issue. I think it goes deep. I think it's deeply layered. I know we talked about this in another podcast called "The Banished Muslim Woman," where we looked at we captured a lot of stories of just women, especially sisters were new to Islam. They were new shahadas who pretty much were banished out of the masjid and out of communities and out of and lived kind of on the cusp of community as a result of this. And I always kind of say this. Sometimes there's these gatekeepers in community, silent sister gatekeepers in the community. But um, Listen, I couldn't begin to tell you exactly what the root of that issue is. I just know that it's a huge issue that's rarely talked about. Number one, because it makes people so uncomfortable, right? Like it makes women uncomfortable, it makes men uncomfortable when you sit there and say, like, okay, why is it this big issue with women versus women, right? And the root of it. But yeah, I do believe that a lot of it does channel back to the men, and not because I'm blaming brothers by no means, but at the end of the day, you guys are our leaders, right? You do set a certain tone, and I do feel like as it relates to even things like this and how the situation has gotten, this stuff is just done like completely in the dark. It's really common in the community from what, because I took an anonymous survey, which is nothing compared to the real numbers, but the numbers were through the roof, brother Habib, just with like
Mm,
local within my locality of people that
mm,
have at least that are currently in a, I guess you could say, quote unquote, secret marriage, or have been in one, or
yeah.
even marriages that they said were temporary, right? Their numbers are very, very high, and a lot of times you just wouldn't know that this has happened or this is happening because it's secret, it's quiet. People are in, people are out. You see people, they look single, but they're, sometimes they're not, right? And so this issue is really a big challenging one. And I guess I'm curious as it relates to, our brothers, as it relates to this when we're talking about this sort of conversation, and just wondering, you know, are conversations being had outside of you as it relates to like making sure this is done in a way that's more honorable, or encouraging brothers to do things in open, or are is there anything being done in the brothers world around this issue?
Yes, yes, there are, but it's very minimal. So like, there's I did had an IG live with a brother, Stanley Ibrahim, who's like a Khatib and an Imam, and he's very straight to the point because especially in the UK, like in the Dawah scene, a lot of like people are involved in this, and he's very much like he's pro in terms of like reprimanding brothers and things like that. But he's one of very few people, I'm honest with you. The attitude amongst a lot of brothers is it's halal, I'm allowed to do it. And I don't know if it's a case of brothers have deceived themselves, but they think it is again like the whole legal loophole because technically it's allowed. So they kind of exploit that because a lot of those brothers they wouldn't be able to do this in Muslim countries. That's the crazy thing. So it's like in the UK, in the West, where a lot of these type of situations are quite prevalent, it's because you can exploit the fact that there isn't any legal apparatus around that's protecting a lot of these women. That's why you can have these type of relationships. In Muslim countries, a lot of you wouldn't, it's very rare to do this. That's why the people that do this in Muslim countries, they go to another country. We have a number of people in Middle East will go to maybe Indonesia, Morocco, but couldn't do it in their own country. Now
Okay.
it's more prevalent in Western societies because obviously we have the nikah, which is like the religious marriage, which is oftentimes not registered. Then that would kind of convince, as long as it's okay in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we don't need to register it. That's how I can kind of manipulate and exploit multiple women. For women who are entering those marriages themselves, again, it's like a woman wants to have intimacy, wants companionship the way the man does, without probably feeling guilty, or she wants to feel like I'm having relationships without without being zina. So some people call it glorified zina, but again, it's like everyone's got needs. The issue is like what you was asking is that our brothers holding brothers to account and to not really because we generally don't get in each other's business.
Hmm.
That's also a thing. We generally also out of respect, well, I don't want to know, so we don't generally question um brothers' behavior unless we see it, if that makes sense. And
Well,
generally we're not going to see it. Or if he comes and says, oh, now I've got two or three or another woman pregnant. Yeah, but you're dealing with the aftermath. You're not going to then go back and say, how could you put yourself in that situation? Does that make sense? So that's also why it's like if you're that's why a brother who might be not doing that, he might have three or four people that he knows that is doing it, but he's none the wiser because we don't really, or a lot of brothers won't talk about and say, oh, well, I did this secret relationship with this. Well, sorry, some brothers do, but generally they're people that don't have much going for themselves, if I'm honest with you. Like I think there was an
okay.
imam you did like what did he call them, bums? It's those bums report Islam, the bums. It was a
Uh,
very strong speech there, mashallah. But that's what I can't remember the Imam's name that you interviewed. Very sharp,
yeah, yeah. I think it's
suited.
Imam Malik.
Yeah, that's
So one of
basically it.
the things I have seen though, just as one of the things I have seen and just had a little insight to see is that some individuals who have navigated, some brothers, let me be specific, some brothers, some men who have navigated Misyar, secret marriages, secret second wives, multiple plural relationships, some secret, some not. Um, they as have actually reported after time of really dealing with a lot of trauma from that. I know you said
Yes.
like men can kind of do it and not really think about it. I think like in the moment, but I have, and just because I've had to support some of them in that regard, but that there tends to be a more long term effect as it
Okay.
relates to this sort of pattern, especially if the pattern is repetitive over a course of time.
Correct.
Yeah, things just like break down within families, break down and like just the
Okay.
ability to like emotionally connect. Like as the person gets older, it fractures other relationships that maybe when you're younger you're able to sustain, and that just has more long-term effects on them, and
No,
they
that
tend to have some regrets in older age.
no, that's what I said. I'm glad you said that. So sorry, and I should have clarified my position on that. Yes, in terms of short term, maybe like 5, 10 years, brothers can get away with it, but long term, you see that they can't. Like you
Yeah,
said, so those effects of broken homes, even for themselves. And this is why, so generally, I'm glad you said that. No, Jazakallah khairan for saying that, because the brothers that have gone through this, whether it's, even if it's not misyad or like polygamy or multiple, like playing around with multiple women, long term, like the brothers, especially maybe between their like mid to late 40s and upwards, they are realizing, you can generally see because the status of the where they're at in life, that they regret a lot of their actions. But that information is often not communicated to the younger ones.
they don't. Yeah,
Yeah. But the ones they do have um conversations with, because like even for myself, when I was young, dumb and having a lot of fun, I had older cousins who were just saying, but again, the way men will, or my older cousins will um advised me is to like be careful. It's not preaching because you think you know it all. So someone can't tell you don't do this, don't do that. It's a kind of saying just be careful and talking about the implications. So whilst I wasn't completely wild, but I tempered it somewhat because of that advice. So that's
yeah,
how you have that advice. So that's how, like you said, a lot of the brothers who have gone through that, you see in the long run, like I said, oftentimes they're not in a good place. Now, again, when a brother's in his 20s and 30s, you can often mask it. And it can, and even amongst a number of his peers, he will still be like, you're the man, you've got these type of women, blah, blah, blah. But when he's past, especially past 40, like most men of that age don't even respect that. But because a lot of, you could say, like the younger brothers in their teenage years, 20s and 30s, they're not maybe connecting with people that are older, so they don't have that, they don't respect it. So they
yeah,
don't realize actually that type of behavior, that that wild behavior that your peers are congratulating you for and tapping your back. When you're actually a mature man, you're going to look at it and you're going to be embarrassed that you've engaged in such behavior. So unfortunately, a lot of the damage has been done. And
yeah,
those brothers themselves, the reason why it's also quite difficult to have those conversations openly, if I'm honest with you, is because it's going to feel like especially if you've got a brother that's maybe had multiple children with multiple women, you don't want to say that you regret your children, especially publicly. So
right.
it's like you're in a double. You like obviously I'm happy with my children. They're a blessing, this and the other. But at the same time, you don't like how it came about. But you have got multiple children from multiple women, and it's like, how do you say that? How would you say that publicly without your children feeling slighted? That are you saying that I wasn't wanted? So
Yeah,
that's why again. So for those type of conversations, brothers do have them um, amongst themselves, but it's only those that they're connected to. They won't really preach about it or talk about it. You understand? Because
right.
again, just imagine if you was an imam and you've gone through that, and now you're like more maturing, like you're now in your 40s, and you regret a lot of that behavior in your 30s. How are you going to say that publicly without your children feeling the type of way?
Yeah.
Do you
Well, I
understand? So
mean,
that's
the
why they might give
internet.
that advice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, no, no. I mean,
sorry.
I totally agree with you, and But it, like I said, it has some serious long-term effects, because the thing is that there's an addictive component to this. And um any type of anything done in excess, we know, is problematic, right? Like, we know that in our faith. And sometimes there's an addictive component of just like constantly like finding something new, finding something new, finding something
Yeah.
new, finding something new. And it just comes to a point, though, just like with any addiction. If somebody was taking cigarettes, or watching porn, or I don't know, shopping a whole lot, there gets to a point where it kind of unravels into other parts of your life. And so if a person is involved in, and I'm talking about someone who's in a repetitive practice of finding new women, new wives, and have a secret here. I found her. I like her. And
Mm.
I remember it was one brother I was counseling through this, and he said, I was always looking for the one, but I'm like 20, 30, like, and realizing that like there was something much deeper there. But
Yeah.
it can kind of spiral to this point where it spills out into your other elements of their lives, and then they realize that maybe economically they've suffered, definitely spiritually they've suffered. They end up Some of them end up having, I hate to say this, but having to settle in a marriage that's not less than what they really want, right? But it's just
Mm.
the last it's like the end here, right? They can't keep
Yeah.
doing it, so they'll end up settling for the one that I guess that's still kind of hanging around after all of that. And so there tends to be these sort of remnants, and I think that's really important to unpack and to understand that side of it, because we talk about all the brothers, they do X, Y, and Z, but there's another side and another layer. And it's not that the brothers just don't care, they can just do it without thinking. I actually think that there's a lot that happens there for those that are engaged in like a repetitive addictive pattern. And the same thing for our sisters. It can also be an addiction as well for male attention, and that
Mm.
constant, so sometimes a sister doesn't want to be tied, and so she may, go in and out of different situations. So it could have that same component. But I know that we've reached our time limit, and I wanted to just offer out now a couple of tools. So I wanted to offer out a couple tools. So I'm going to have you start, and then I'll finish up, or I'll add a couple tools in as well. But I did want you to offer just a couple tips of those navigating, um, and navigating a misyar, or even someone who's on the other side of it, especially maybe if they've navigated it with a public figure, an imam.
Oh, oh, you're going
Okay.
there.
Or just your regular your go-to Muslim. But how does someone heal from that, or what are some things that they can do to kind of put things back in place for themselves?
Oh, that's a tough one. Okay, the first one for someone who's healing from Misyar or secret marriage, to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost. And
Yeah.
I like Sister Angelica Lindsay Ali, she's got a concept of Allah-centered self-love. I think that's extremely important, first and foremost. Um, Secondly, and we spoke about this before, about the importance of finding a supportive tribe, women, friends that will listen to you and have a level of empathy. I think that's also extremely important because, again, it can be quite difficult to go through this by yourself. And there will be a lot of people, and just be careful who you share your story to, because a lot of people that probably don't have the level of empathy that you probably would need and be supportive. So you just need to be careful who you share your story with and who you speak to and you confide in. So definitely finding the supportive tribe. Number three, sign up to Coach Sabria. She'll build you a village. So Coach Sabria will build you a village. Now for the brothers, it's the importance of developing sexual discipline. I think it's a virtue that we don't promote. Because, like you mentioned earlier, this idea of sleeping around has been normalized, whether it's done outside of marriage or these de facto polygamous marital arrangements. It's just a type of womanizing that we just try to put halal cloak over. But it's a lot of it. It comes down to a lack of sexual discipline, and again, obviously, prioritize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and again, just think about the effects that you're going to. Because a lot of brothers, I'll be honest, it's been so normalized, it takes a while to unlearn this type of behavior. Like honestly, brothers are just as much, um, like to sound quite strange, victims as the other perpetrators of all this, because a lot of them don't know any better. I was speaking for myself. It took a while to get out of that mentality because that's also what you're hearing from society. the culture, whether it's hip hop music and this and the other, as well as in the masajid. It's That's what it means to be a man, to have multiple women or multiple wives. And then even if you're doing it in these type of um bad practices, but it's halal, so you convince yourself that it's okay. And then brother circles, brothers be laughing and joking, and like brothers won't, like, if a woman, for example, were to say, I've been married for 30 years, other women will be like, mashallah, nice to hear that, just and that. Brother says that. The brothers, that's no one's gonna bat an eyelid. The brother comes in and said, I've got a second wife, I've got a third wife. MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Now the thing is that why is it MashaAllah when you don't even think about the impacts or the potential trauma you're going to inflict on the first wife? That's not even considered, unfortunately, because again, the way we view again manhood is about having multiple wives without thinking about the effects that it can cause not only on other women but also our children as well. So yeah, what's the other thing? Oh yeah, the brother can also. You said you do counselling for men, so you can go to Coach Sabria for
Yeah,
counselling
go to
because
Habeeb Akande. Listen,
no, I don't do
I
counselling. Yeah,
I'm sitting over
sorry.
here, mashallah, like this is the coaching corner. I just want to say that I need some space, Habib. Um, this is the coaching corner, and I am representing the role as Coach Sabria, but I will say that this topic is very difficult for me. It's just really difficult. I think there are layers within this dialogue that I myself am not quite ready to navigate publicly,
Mhm.
right? Um, and so this is my struggle. Even with temporary marriage, when I did that one, and all these are my struggle shows. Number one, because I know my audience, and I know my audience very well. I know a lot of the people who watch the Muslim Woman. I know my audience. Okay, so this is a sensitive topic for my audience, and I just feel like when we cover these topics, I think you do an incredible job. You do an incredible job on your platform. May Allah bless you and guide you, increase you, and allow your work to really be something that benefits the community. But I think these things are done, and I'm speaking for myself and how I've navigated on the platform with like kid gloves, right? Because there's so many sensitivities, right? Like there's this element of you know you know the polygyny conversation, right? That's nuanced and that's sensitive, and that's people that are protective of that are trying to do it right. And then there's the complexity of situations like this where they're done in secret. Misyar, people giving up their rights, that has all kinds of I've heard all kinds of stories, okay, that just make you really scratch your head. Also, what I was also going to speak of is when this is done as a cover for adultery. When it's done, like, okay, I'm going to clean up my side piece, and we're going to do a quick marriage, and it's going to be like this Miss Yard thing, and it's over here, and it's like, and when these situations happen as well, that often don't get talked about, because that's mostly what I get on my desk. I get situations where, oh, I found out my husband had an affair. He quickly married her and said, now we in polygyny, right? What do I do? Right. And it ends up being a lot of these Miss Yar situations where, that was the girlfriend. And so she's not thinking that she's, getting any rights, or she doesn't come into the table like that. So it becomes like a Miss Yar type of situation.
That's not
Um,
Miss Young.
Sorry,
Yeah, I know. Let's
you said that's
let's
not a
be
Miss
honest.
Yar?
That's what that is. Like you said, it's covering adultery. So it's adultery. It's not
Right.
Misyar. You said what it is. So
Right. I
because
agree.
someone is trying to cover it up, it doesn't give it another name. It's adultery. That's what it is.
It's
Now, and
adultery.
a lot of those is adultery, and a lot of what it is people trying to cover it up. It comes down to lack of character, ethics, and morals.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you've done something wrong, own up to it and and obviously you have to deal with the consequences. But then when you're trying to cover it and then you're making it out like, this has been a legitimate relationship, so therefore my wife has got no reason to be upset and grieve because I'm allowed to take a second, third, and fourth wife. You're being deceitful.
And
You're only
that's
deceiving that, and that's again, that's why when we talk about that, you mentioned polygamy, that's different. Again, as long as it's ethically and moral, that's different. But when we talk about this secret relationship, secret marriage, it comes down to morals and ethics because people, again, you don't, okay, well, I'll ask the question, why don't you have this problem in the Christian community that they're having secret wives? Why don't you have it in a non-Muslim community? Because they don't, if they're having a relationship, as long as it's consensual, it is what it is. But when you're using a religion to cover up your tracks, you're really, again, this is why for me it's even more problematic because you're using the religion to justify adultery. If you want to commit zina, go and commit zina. If you want to, but again, especially if you're married, then as well, it's even worse. It's even worse because you're making the woman feel that even though I've cheated on you, I've stepped out on a marriage, it's allowed and you have to accept it.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
the problem. That's the problem. And then you're calling it another name. So that's what I'm saying. It's not Misyar. That's something totally different. So if someone has got a girlfriend and then the wife finds out, or because she's pregnant, the second woman, then you have a secret marriage to clean it up. No, that's still adultery. Call it what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. No, 100%. I've said that many times on my platform. And honestly, like, it's cowardly. It's really
It's
unattractive. If I
cowardly.
could just say this as a woman, it's unattractive if a man got to go in the dark to do something. Like that's not, it's not attractive, it's very cowardly. And a lot of times women would rather you just kind of be very bold and brazen and upfront with what it is that you want, and a lot of times that will get you a lot further. But that's neither here nor there. I did want to just finalize these couple of points because I didn't want to lead this conversation without talking about the many situations of, I guess you can say, misyar, or secret marriages, or situations that occur when people are navigating more emotionally abusive, narcissistic type of situations. And this is where a person may be targeted in the realm of their emotions and the realm of their unmet needs. So, like, a woman may be targeted, perhaps, for example, a woman may have an issue with her father where she felt rejected. So maybe she has sensitivities and an unmet need around validation and around acceptance and around love and belonging, etc. And someone is watching her and mirroring her for a while, and then exploits that, and then gets her involved in an emotional situation for a while. And typically these individuals promise people the world. They have all kinds of, they future fake, they do all kinds of things, and then they end up getting into situations once they're emotionally attached, right? That maybe they didn't realize that's what they were signing up for, i.e., like a secret relationship. Not to say the person isn't responsible, but that type of healing and recovery that comes from being in a more addictive type of cycle or addictive type of relationship is a lot heavier. So when people, sometimes, I know, like, yes, people go in with eyes full wide open, they enter into these sort of situations, and then some people are groomed and worked on, and for a long time. Sometimes I was just dealing with a case where, sister, she was young. I'm not going to say her age, but she was a teenage. Like I said, she was younger. She was younger, and she wasn't she converted to Islam, but the brother worked on her for a really, really, really long time, and she ended up being a secret second wife, right? Like, she ended up being, yes, she's responsible, but at the same time, like, she was really, really groomed, and she had a hard time getting out of that relationship. She actually spiraled and had some challenges later on, in life, when it comes to her mental health and her spiritual well-being and all of that, as time went on. So situations like that, I just want to mention and make emphasis. If you're in situations like that, please understand, and I said this on the last episode, that not only are you doing what Brother Habeeb said, but you're also kind of recovering. You're also going through the recovery process as it relates to anything that is addictive or narcissistic, because a lot of times these situations, when they're deceptive, they come with manipulation. Right? They come with manipulation. They come with other sort of tactics to keep people involved in these situations. And so that is very important to know. And it's important to know the signs when you're being targeted in that way. So I did just want to say that and add that layer to the conversation. But I do thank you so much, Brother Habeeb, for your conversation and for your contribution on this. This is something that is like, we just hit the iceberg. It's so many other layers to this. Oh, Brother Habib froze at this moment. Alhamdulillah. We definitely appreciate you guys being a part of this conversation. It's, like I said, it's a layered one. We definitely want you guys to continue the conversation. If you know someone that is involved in this, if you yourself are involved in this, please reach out. This is definitely a judgment-free zone. Reach out for support. See how you can be supported through it, because we really want our community to be, number one, become knowledgeable what your rights are, what if you're navigating a relationship or a marriage that is correct or maybe even haram, that is something that we want you to have those resources and support and just ways to navigate through it. Brother Habib, are you back?
Yes, I am back. I'm sorry. I'm glad you said what you said about the last situation because I'm glad you, just to clarify that when I was talking about women being accountable, it's women who have knowingly gone into those situations or those relationships not being groomed because there are unfortunately some brothers who are like spiritual predators who will seek out vulnerable women and scheme groom them for a number of weeks, months, even maybe years. I'm not talking about that type of situation. And even when we look at it, especially just the last point, women who are like that, even if you, and again, this is where a lot of people they lose sight of when they think about the polygamy and the verses of written polygamy.
I wonder if this is a sign that Brother Habib's internet keeps going out. That it's a sign that it's a time that it's time, because it's like 2 a.m. in the UK right now. So I also want to honor Brother Habib's sleep schedule. I'm praying that he comes back so he can finish his thought. But if not, I do want you guys to understand that we come on the coaching corner every week. Sometimes we have guests, sometimes we don't. We pick different topics. So we want you guys to be tuned into our Monday conversations. Okay, Brother Habib, you're back. Finish your thought.
Yeah, sorry. I was just saying that, and just for people to reflect on when they think about like polygamy, the verses in Surah An-Nisa, the fourth chapter of the Quran, when Allah speaks about polygamy, the allowance, the permission, not the God-given right for polygamy. That when Allah speaks about before, like the permission, the allowance to have two, three, or four wives, the context of it is the orphan girls who are being taken advantage of. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why Allah was telling the men, a lot of the men at the time who were taking advantage, who they had orphan girls who they would look after, but sometimes they would exploit them financially and then want to marry them, take their money. And that's why Allah prevented them from marrying those women and from exploiting them. Again, read the context of even when you're thinking about polygamy, it's supposed to safeguard women's interests. So again, unfortunately, the way we've understood polygamy is it's just an allowance for men to have up to four wives because of our sexual desires. That's not the context in terms of how the verse was revealed. And again,
Mm-hmm.
if you think about those orphan girls, it's like how a number of women who are vulnerable today, whether they are single mothers, divorcees, new into Islam, do not have a support system. They are like, you can say, like the orphan girls of the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and extra safeguards that Allah placed on them. And a lot of, even when a lot of people talk about the verse, like, don't go near zina, Allah mentions that. Allah also says, do not go near the wealth of orphan girls, of the orphans. Use the same command. Like, don't go near it because a lot of people was taken advantage of them, and they're the most vulnerable people of society. So then I just think even the way we look at the deen, it's supposed to safeguard and to protect women, and this is from our tradition. But for whatever reason, I don't think we've done a good enough job showcasing this, and we're it's actually, if anything, we're misrepresenting the son of the Prophet peace be upon him. So I just wanted to end on that point. I'm glad you clarified about the women who have been groomed. They are not the ones who I'm talking about in terms of like taking accountability and things like that. It's the women who are, who've got their faculties and they know what they're getting into. But I'm glad again, like I said, you
Yeah.
mentioned that point. Jazakallah khairan.
Well, yeah. Thank you so much for this. And I appreciate what you just said about the context of polygyny was to to main to maintain women, and it was for the benefit of women, and that's something that's important to hear. We hear people say it, but mashallah, like it is what it is, as far as what it got funneled out to be. But I do appreciate you making that point, because mashallah, we do. I do want to say, I know, like, it's, whenever we talk about these issues, it's sensitive. And I do just want to say, like, I saw something on your page that I thought was really powerful. It was one of the posts, and I think you had reposted someone's critique of you, and you had commented to them, and they were saying, like, why do you hate polygyny? I don't want to misquote them, but what I remember, it was something like, why do you hate polygyny, and why do you something? And I remember you saying, like, you're an advocate for polygyny done well. Like you deal with the misuse of it, and actually you're pretty
Mm.
protective of the sanctity of that practice. Because you mentioned you were Nigerian. Did I understand that correctly? I saw
Right.
something in that
100%.
regard.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, mashallah. So may Allah bless you for that. And I do think that's important to state. And I always say that as well. Like people who do want to actually do this practice properly, you should actually be very offended by those who hijack it for their own reasons. You shouldn't be defending it or be in
Mhm.
the ring with them, right? You should be outside the ring wanting the sacred practice that the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam
Correction.
um, participated in. We should want to protect the sanctity of that, right? In the honor of that sunnah and not have it hijacked with all this cockamamie, mess that we have out here. So, alhamdulillah. So, we'll end on that point. I know it's super late there, Brother Habeeb. I really appreciate you. Can you just tell us really quickly, for those who don't know, how can we stay like in the know with a lot of the things that you're doing? Like, how can people plug in to you?
Yeah, so you can on Instagram, name Habeeb, Habeeb underscore Akende. I've got also an institute. I've got online courses called Eritology Institute, so eritologyinstitute.com. I'm also on Twitter, but yeah, Instagram if you want a bit of education and entertainment. Then for online courses, you can go to Eritology Institute, and then my book's also available on Amazon.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much. There was one question. I don't know if it can be answered. It said, please explain single mothers. Do you know what that is referencing or no?
Sorry,
The
what was
question
that?
said, can you please explain single mothers? Where we was, I don't,
In terms of they're often targeted?
yeah,
Is that
Brother
what?
Robert, you would have to explain that question for us to answer it. So I just, yeah, mashallah. Were there any other questions before we end? I think that is it. I think, oh, there was one question that we missed, which was, and maybe you could do it really quickly because I know we're late. What happens with the children in these situations? When people have children in Misyar, what happens to the children with the kids?
That's a good. I mean, this is a point. Um, those children are legitimate children because someone did ask me that question that in a misyard marriage, because people, and this is why we have to be careful when someone says that's not a marriage. But then someone asked me the question, okay, if it's not a marriage, but people are saying it on one of my um posts, does that mean that the children are legitimate children? I say, no, no, of course not. I wouldn't even say that. So we're not saying that, but the problem is, again, in terms of for people to be responsible, one needs to think about the welfare of the children. So that's what the person's asking. Yes, this is a problem when you're engaging in, misyard or like these temporary marriages, and you're not thinking, oh, secret marriages, sorry. You have to think about the children as well, but also even think about the dignity of your wife, because as much as you talk about the children, which is true, what about the dignity of the woman that you promise to love and to look after? You think it's okay? You think it's allowed to enter another relationship secretly without her knowing, and also not even thinking about the health implications. So it's just having again. I think a lot of people like to talk about their children, which is again it's important, but also I think it's important to think about the woman herself, the first wife herself, or the other party, because she's a dignified or he's a dignified person, irrespective of whether there's children or not. But in terms of the question, if the person's asking other children, like,
No, I think
is it
they're asking what happens to the kids. I took it as like, are the kids just
oh,
typically being with the single mom? Let's just say if it lasted
oh,
for amount
often
of
what
time.
happens, yeah, so often what happens is that because they are often discarded, and the man, the first marriage is like the marriage. The second marriage, the Misiara marriage, generally after that marriage comes to an end, the women, I mean, sorry, the children are just left for the mother to look after. Unfortunately, there is even a number of documentaries in parts of Indonesia, in parts of other Southeast Asian countries, where a number of men who've gone to this South Asian country, Muslim men, had children with them, and the children are abandoned. There's a documentary, this the forgotten kids of Saudi men or something like that. It's a prevalent practice, unfortunately, and it's disgusting. This is again, it's not what our religion teaches, but this
Yeah.
is something that people are doing, and they're not thinking about the implication of the children.
Wow. SubhanAllah. Thank you for answering that. The last question, I think the brother posted it twice, but Brother Hussein said, a marriage where there is a wali The dowry is paid and the man provides monthly maintenance, but they live in separate states and see one another a few times a month. Would this be considered misyar? I'll put it
Right.
on.
Good question. So, a marriage where there's a wali that was paid and the man provides. No, that's not. No, that's not really because again, well, the first point is if, for example, that's his only wife, that's the arrangement. That's fine. If that's a second wife, then technically, according to the Sunnah, he should spend each amount of days with each wife. But then if he has an arrangement with the second wife that, okay, because of my situation, I'm going to be spending most of the time with my first wife, and then she foregoes her rights for him to spend the nights equal nights with her as the first wife. So he's only going to speak with her a few times a month. That would be considered a Messiah marriage because she forego the rights of having equal nights. So that only applies in terms of the Messiah status if he has more than one wife. But if that's his only wife, who's living in one state or one country, she's living in another, and he only sees her a few times a month. That's not a it's Misyar marriage. That's just a marriage. So Misyar again, it's just where one partner foregoes their rights. That's how you try and understand it. It's a valid marriage, but one partner basically says you don't need to provide something that I'm entitled to by the Sharia. But also, I forgot to mention, someone can then ask for those rights back. So, like if a woman gets into Misyar marriage and she says, "Okay, you don't need to provide maintenance, so you don't need to stay with me," every other night, like with your other wife. But then she can change her mind and say, "No, I want you to give me maintenance. I need you to give me housing." Now, what happens with a lot of brothers is then because they may not be able to give her that, then that's why they divorce the woman, and that's why oftentimes the woman that's in the misyar marriage, which shouldn't be the case, is like second fiddle to the main wife, and that's why it's always kind of seems quite problematic.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that's a really important point. I think that's a really important point that if this at any time the individual can re-ask for their rights, and at that point it becomes obligatory for the person to give it to them. But in these cases, like you said, a lot of times that's when the divorce will happen because
Yeah,
that's got it. Makes sense. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. May Allah bless you and increase you. Again, follow Habeeb Akande and his work. Continue to, and you say you have classes, right? You have classes that you do or
yeah,
workshops. Okay. Yep. So continue to tap in and follow him at Habeeb
yeah. Online
Akande.
courses.
Okay, on Instagram, and you can stay up to date with everything that he does. I did just want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you guys for being here. Thank you for tuning in to the Dope Muslim Woman podcast. Until next time, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.